G'day, I'm Bruce, and today I'm going to see if I can get this old UD tip truck going that's been sitting here for a long time. This is the old UD truck that I called in and had a bit of a look at the other day, and when I opened the door up there were a couple of huge spiders just inside the door there. There's the first one that greeted me, and there's the second one further down. It is fairly low-lying country here, fairly flat country I must say anyway, and the water seems to be still laying, it's still wet, and looks like the tyres have nearly sunk into the ground. It's been sitting here for a fair while. I don't think it would drive out of here under its own steam. I think it would nearly have to be pulled out. So I think it had sunk into the ground a bit too far, I'd reckon. This is a bit of old lantana here that started growing up around it. Now, I did manage to get the door open the other day, and this is where two huge spiders ran out. The cameraman wasn't quick enough to get the video rolling, but he did manage to take a couple of pictures with his phone, and you can see both of them there. Where are they now? They'd be in there somewhere. There's the first nasty waiting for us. Look at those wasps there, just ready to have a crack at us. I've got a fresh can of mortine here, and I'm going to give them a dose of that. I was told many years ago by an old timer the first thing you do is knock the nest down. He used to always just go up, and even if they were there, he'd knock the nest down, and he reckoned that that's it, then they'll take off. But I've never tried that. I've always thought, well, if you knock the nest down, by the time you get away, they've probably bitten you, probably stung you. No, that's the sort of place they like to get, somewhere like that where it's hard to find. No, I can't see any. That doesn't mean to say they're not there somewhere. It's all just full of mould, and this is the sort of place spiders really love, so we're just going to give them a bit of a fumigation. Just going to hold the button down for a little bit. And wasp in there somewhere, or something flying around, a few bugs. Here's a shot of the inside of the cab. Here's one looking across the dash. I can certainly see why the spiders like living in here. I'm just looking down in here. I think this was Ceratro vine. A lot of people used to have that as a cow feed. Many years ago, a lot of farms had that planted on it. Sometimes the cows completely ate it out. More like a vine than... I think it's supposed to boost the nitrogen in the soil. We've got some weight listings down here. I'm just looking in here at the suspension. Pretty heavy duty leaves there. Just having a look at the fuel tank. It looks like someone's been here and siphoned the fuel out, but the siphon hose is still sitting in there. Bit of garden hose by the look of it. And unfortunately the lid is off it, but it's in such a place that it might be okay, there might not be any water in it. That's providing the tipper body hasn't rusted out, but it does have a rust hole in it here, just in that section up there. And the cap, well, I don't know where the cap is, but certainly can't see it laying around here anywhere. I think I'll go and get my other piece of hose and just dip it and just see whether there's any fuel left in it or not. I'm just going to check the level. No, it looks like it's dry. I suspect it might be dry with the siphon hose hanging out of it. Sounds pretty dry. Yep, she's MT. There's a shot looking in from the left-hand side, looking at the engine, and it would have to be a turbocharged engine looking at the crossover pipe. I'm just going to check the oil now. Yeah, the oil's down on the minimum mark. That's the minimum mark, and that'll be the maximum mark there. So I could probably do with some more oil putting in it. They're probably in here hiding somewhere. There's the badge on the dash, covered in a bit of mould. Cobwebs galore. There's what looks to be a build plate, but I can't actually read a year on it. That'll scare the spiders. No, nothing in there. Yeah, it looks like that's where the batteries live, between the tipper and the cab. Looks like a very awkward place to get at, to put some batteries in, so we might tilt the cab next. There's the fuel filter assembly in there, wedged in behind the air cleaner. Fairly hard place to get at. For a truck this size, it certainly has a big air cleaner and a pretty big intake and everything. I was surprised to see it would be that big. I don't know what horsepower it would be. Looks like it might be about a 22mm socket to undo that, and we'll try and fold the bull bar down and see if we can tilt the cab. The tilt handle's on the left-hand side. I can see the hook on the other side, so just put a little bit of WD-40 on here. Might make it a little bit easier to get off. Everything there's a bit rusty. Probably can't see it, but there's a ball joint in there that I've just given a spray. Might have to go around the other side and give it a spray. I'm just going to give this here a bit of a tapping. I think the lever works this from the other side, but I think it might be seized up here, but I'm not sure. Should have some eye protection on, I guess. I think it's moving on this side, but I think it's seized on the other side. No. It looks like it's the hook on this side that's stuck, but the cameraman's been underneath with the hammer, giving it a good flogging, and it looks like it's just starting to move a little bit now. There's another hook here, and it is free, but it must be seized somewhere else, possibly on the other side. There's a linkage coming from the other side across to this side that must be seized up, probably somewhere we can't really get a go at it. We can see a lot of this obvious stuff here is pretty easy to get at, but in between, very difficult to get at in between. We are very slowly making progress here. Both of these hooks, if you go back to where the pivot is, where it comes from the inside to the outside, onto the back of that hook, both of those places were seized, we reckon. The cameraman is over on the other side. He's pulling on the lever, and I'm hammering on this side, just trying to shake a bit of rust out, spraying a bit of WD-40. We worked it backwards and forwards for a while, and it didn't seem to matter what we did, we weren't really gaining any ground very quickly. One of them has just come undone. You can see the cab starting to move a little bit there now. The one on this side is still hooked, but the one on the cameraman's side, it's let go. Well, after more than an hour of hammering and spraying and moving and putting levers on top of levers to try and get more leverage, it's finally let go. We had this pipe on here, and we knew that if we put too much force on that, we snapped this lever off or whatever, then the game would be over. Just looking there now, it looks like 3 of the hooks are free, and it looks like she should tilt. All right, here goes nothing. I think I'm going to need the cameraman to help me with this one. This one's probably got a small spring there helping it, but not big enough, so I don't know whether there's a heap of water in the back of the cab or what's going on. Here we go. Here's the 3rd attempt. Well, again, this arrangement here, to stay to hold the cab in that position, was seized, so we had a hell of a fight trying to unseize that, while we also had the cab over at maximum tilt, which was very difficult. It appears to have a bigger engine in it than what I first thought it would have. Like the rest of the truck, totally covered in spider webs. Look at this idea here. That's very heavy duty idea where the gears on the front of the engine are actually driving the water pump. And this one were trying pretty hard when they made this engine. It's got a sizable turbocharger on it as well. It's a separate cylinder heads. When it comes time to pull them apart and recondition them, or whether you're going to do an in-chassis rebuild, at least the cylinder heads aren't too heavy to lift off. Some of those other big engines where you've got big heavy cylinder heads, well, you really need to be underneath a crane in a shed or somewhere just to get the heads off the engine. It looks like it'd be a terrible thing to try and put the batteries in. I thought it might be easy with the cab tilted, but I don't think so. You'd have to try and shove the batteries in here somewhere. I don't know whether you can see, there's a lead there. I can't even see where the other lead is, but obviously I can't fit through here, and I'm not strong enough to pick a battery up and just go through there. Pretty difficult. The only other way you could get the batteries in there would be if you could get them up on top of here somewhere, and then try and come over through the top to come down through here, which there again, you'd have to be pretty strong to lower the battery down there without dropping it. So I think I might even see if I can just get jumper leads, have the batteries on the ground outside, and if my jumper leads are good enough, I think I'll just try and plug straight onto the starter motor and see if I can short across the starter motor to see if I can get it to crank that way. If you look hard down here, well, there's dirt in between the cylinder heads, but there's actually a gap in here between the heads, so individual tappet covers of course and individual cylinder heads underneath. So it's an idea they had on German trucks. They had that on trucks like MANs and that. They've had that for many, many years. I'm just going to see if I can undo this tap and see if there is any water in this tank before I put any more diesel in. Well, it's pretty empty there now. Looks okay. There's diesel. Oh well. It doesn't have a lid on the tank, but I suppose it is tucked in there, the filler. I suppose it must be right. I guess we'll just add some diesel in. I'm not sure how much diesel we'll have to put in. I'm not sure where the pickup is. A lot of these trucks can have the pickup in the back of the tank. I think it is slightly downhill at the front. Trucks like our Bluey, you have to put at least 50 in just to get it to start. That's on level ground. The moment you start driving around and you go around a corner and you back off the throttle, all the fuel surges up this end, they suck air. Then when you go to accelerate on a bit, next thing they've got air in the system again because you haven't got enough fuel. You've probably got to have at least 100 litres, 150 litres maybe if you're really going to drive uphill and down Dale so they don't suck air. I reckon I'll put the batteries on the ground here first, big jumper leads, see if I can hook onto the starter motor and just see whether it will turn over before I go and dump 50 litres of fuel in the tank. Because if that motor doesn't turn and it seized, well, I've just wasted 50 litres of fuel. "24-volt system. Turn that around. On second thoughts, we went to plug onto the starter motor, but it's just too hard. The old cover on top of where the main lead goes onto the solenoid is just like a hunk of steel. The old piece of rubber's gone that hard, so I think we might have to put the batteries in their proper place. Going to get the cameraman to get up in the most awkward place and put the batteries in for me. Cameraman's volunteered to do the job, so I think that's a good idea. We'll have a go at cleaning these up. If I don't clean up the terminals enough, we're on 24 volts, it's easy enough just to blow one of the poles off the battery, and all of a sudden that battery's had it then, so better try and do the job as good as I can. way you think looks right. But it's one positive this end and one negative. I'm just going to tap the side of this nut, see if I can loosen it up a bit. It worked. That's a good trick. It was that stiff before. I had it on the battery. I thought if I put any more strain on it, I'd probably break the post off the battery. Now I know I've got it loose. I'll just have to clean this off to make it a bit quicker to pull apart. Obviously the end's a lot rustier than the part inside the nut was, so. It's going to fight to the end. And I'm going to win. Right. Now I've got the bolt out, I can really do the job properly. The terminal was that loose on the battery that I thought, well, I've got to get this bolt to tighten up. So I thought I'll undo the nut first, get it off, then I can get a go at the thread where the nut's got to go to pull it up tight. And this is the quickest and easiest way to get a really good go at it. Obviously, if you're in a workshop, just take this over to a circular wire buff on a grinder, on a bench grinder. This is thinner. This will be better for the... I'll make sure it's right before I put it on there. Doesn't want to go past that point. A little bit of grease. Remember the story? Always think of the next person. It's going to have to be working on this bomb. It's got a bend in it. So it's going to be happy for the bend to go that way. That's the way it came out, so we'll put it back in that way. That's the way it's going to be the happiest to stay. Tap. Tighten that nut up, it'll help pull it through. Bit more of a tap. I know it's slow, but most of these jobs are. Luckily we bought our own jumper cable, otherwise we wouldn't be able to get it going at all. So I'll just check I've got that fairly tight. Yep. This is a cheat's way of doing this job. I'll make that a little bit tighter. Right, that's on there tight. I'm just going to check that the throttle is free. Yes, the throttle's free. Next thing we're going to check is the stopper, and obviously you don't want the stopper in the stop position when you're cranking. Looks like the dash is totally dead. Yeah, the isolator here. I'll get a bit of spray and put on that. It's a very hard thing to trace the wiring too, so I'm sure this has got to be turned clockwise. It should snap over. Will that come off? No. It should go over. There we are. It's gone over centre. Normally, with most of these things, the plunger's got to push in to make contact with these two bolts on the back here. So obviously as we turn that, it'll stay in that position. So the tightening position normally engages them. That's connection, that's disconnection. Rightio. We don't know how good that is either, so I'll just check the dash. Yeah, the dash is dead. The next problem is we can't tap into the positive pole on the starter motor, which is alive all the time, to run through this button back to the active one on the back to the one that we've got to put power onto on the solenoid. So we've just had to spread this out. We'll put that on the solenoid. We'll try and go right back to the battery to get our live wire off the battery. This is it. We're ready for the big test. See whether the motor's going to turn or not. Yes. Right, we know the motor's going to turn. That's a good thing. I think we should probably put some diesel in the fuel tank. So we'll probably put about 50 litres. I think that's all we've got with us in the fuel tank, in the hope that we've got enough fuel in the tank for the thing to suck the fuel up. Of course, we don't know either. It's been sitting, the tank's probably been sitting empty for years. So you can imagine wherever the pipe goes in. It could be this pipe here. Obviously, where it goes down into the bottom of the tank, the moment all the fuel's siphoned out or drained, that bit of fuel that's in that line going like that, all of a sudden then air can come up and fuel can go down. So if we're going from here to there, that length of fuel line is probably going to have air in it, even when we pour the fuel in. So even if we get a start, it might run for a little bit by the time that's if it still has fuel in its system, which it should have. But by the time it only runs for, say, a minute or less, depending on how much air it's got in it, that air will come up, go through the filter, goes through the system, looks like it's going to go up through that jigger and back down, and then it'll probably shut down, so then on it might be difficult to try and get that air out of the system, but we don't know till we give it a go. Next up, it'll be a dose of Fuel Doctor. In the tank it goes. As the cameraman walks around to get the hose, the siphon hose, just have a look at where it's parked. Just have a look at how much mud there is here. Look at that. Because this country is very flat, it is up higher than, I suppose, other watercourses, but this area here is very flat. Because it's so flat, because it has animals on it, and we've had so much rain off and on for months and months and months, the ground is that soft that anywhere the cattle walk, you can see here where their hooves have been, there's water just laying in the marks where they've been walking. This has been an unusually long wet season this year. That's why there's still water laying everywhere. It's the first 20 gone in. I've actually cleaned all the burrs and everything off the little copper end with the marble in it, just so it might flow the fuel through a bit quicker. I think it does too. Back when I was young, I had Ford V8 cars with Windsor's and Cleveland V8 engines, and I used to port the heads out just to make them go a bit harder, and I reckon it definitely made a difference. More flow. If you look on the end here, you'll see all polished up, no burrs when you buy them. There's a sharp edge, and obviously anywhere that's got a sharp edge won't flow as good as anywhere that's got a smooth edge. So all that's all been polished up. And here's the last 10, and we're not going to put it all in case we've got to force feed it to try and get it to go or keep going. So we'll put some in, keep a little bit in reserve. That might do, I think. That's it for fuel. So the next move is going to be put some water in the header tank for the radiator. It's a leaky funnel out the side. Righto, we know we've got water. Might stick a little bit more in. It's taken a while to let the air come back out of the system. We're pretty, oh well, no, it's going to burgle down a bit more. That's about it now, I'd say. I've already checked the engine oil and it was right down on the minimum mark. So I will put some more oil in the engine just to be sure it's got enough in it. That's the oil filler cap there now, so it's pretty easy to get at, I'd reckon. Should be a pretty good engine in this one. Look how clean that is. Look how clean that engine is inside. That should be a really good engine. Well, I guess it must be story time. One of my friends had one of these trucks. He was a grazier. That meant he had cattle. He had a crate on the back. Could probably carry about 15 big animals. Anyway, he had this truck for years, UD truck. It looked about the same era as this one. So he goes and buys a real later model truck. And he was a bit disappointed. I said, oh, the later model one should be heaps better. No, he said, the old thing, once I got on a hill, once it started dying, I could whack it back a gear and keep it rolling. He said, the later model one, he said, it wasn't like that. He said, it didn't like it changing down. He said, you had to wait till the engine got back down to a low amount of revs before you could change it back. He said, just the way it was designed. So I think the only thing that ever happened to his, it was starting to get a bit of rust in the doors. Not too bad, but. And I think he just thought, oh, well, time to update. He was an elderly gent. He'd probably put up with older gear most of his life, and I think he probably thought, well, I'll just go for a newer truck. Now I've got the money before I fully retire. I'll just go around and check the oil, just check where it's at. It seems strange having the dipstick tube sticking out so far. You'd think they'd be worried about something coming up here and breaking it off, but I don't know whether you can make out, but there's the notch there and there's the mark there. So we're pretty close to full. We'll stick a little bit more in. We've gone this far, we might as well go a little bit further. And I reckon that'll be pretty close, I reckon. It looks like about here. There's our full mark there, so I'll just check it again. Looks like now it's back to about here. So there's your full mark there. By the time that last little bit drains down into the engine, it will be spot on full, I'd say. Well, we've got fuel, we've got water, we've topped the oil up, we've got our batteries in place, we've got the hot wire lead on, the button, so here we go. Just imagine, that's amazing. The first time the piston came up, the thing fired and ran. And I thought, here we were wondering whether it was going to be seized, or, you know, some of these things you come along and everything's dead as a dodo, and you think, well, be prepared to half flatten the batteries before you get a bang out of them. But that thing just fired up right up like that. But it is a very good engine. You look inside that engine, it is spotless. You can hear it ticking away there now behind me. It's just purring, just running away there. What a nice engine. Well, I think it's still a bit too wet to look like driving it out, but it's funny how these videos go. I thought the engine in this truck might be very hard to get going because it looked like it was sitting here for a long time. The hardest part of this video was undoing this bizzo here to tilt the cab. Once that was up, that probably took us easy an hour of just hammering and tapping and spraying. And then once we got the cab up, I suppose there's the general stuff that you do with oil and water and batteries and battery terminals and whatever. Once we had all that done, the rest was easy. Just push the button, started instantly. So you can't pick them. And yet there's other things we've been to, and we think, right, everything so far is easy. This thing's going to go now. Won't go. Injector pump, something wrong with something stuck in the injector pump. We've got no chance of driving out of here today. You can see it's down to the rims. Everything's too wet. We may have to wait a little bit for it to dry out. It's that wet and it's that far down, we even think we may even need something with tracks even when it dries out to pull this thing out of where it's sitting. If you would like to see us come back and have another go at it and try and move it out and try and tip the bin, see what's in the bin, please leave a comment below, and if enough people say, yeah, go back and see if she'll drive, we'll come back and have another try. After seeing how long it's been sitting and how easy it started, I can see how my friend really missed his UD cattle truck. The sun's quite hot now and the humidity's pretty high with all this moisture coming back up out the ground. That'll be about it for this video now. So until next time, thanks very much for watching.